And they had on, next to him, a woman. She was very sort of, she was like a tall, cool drink. She looked a little bit like Lauren Bacall. And she was from something called the Tobacco Institute, which I hadn't known about. And every time this triple PhD said something, she went, please. As if to say, do you think I just got off of that here? Do you really expect us to believe that? And it was love at first sight. This sort of neo-Puritanism that is sweeping the country. And could I hang out with you? And so I did. And I followed her around. And she went to things like health conferences where she was greeted up the way Nick Naylor was greeting her. I love that scene where they do the woman spitting. And at the end of it, about the last time I talked to her, we were in her office, and she was smoking. She's a beautiful smoker. Really, she made me want to have had sex with her. And I said, there's something I'm dying to ask you, but I feel a little bit awkward. And she said, what's a nice girl like me doing in a place like this? I said, yeah, exactly. And she said, I'm just paying mortgage. So that became the yuppie Nuremberg time. But the answer to your question is that the book was published in 1994, but it was optioned, even pre-publication, by a guy named Mel Gibson.
He's an interesting driver and drinker.
He was recently arrested for driving while anti-Semitic. Mel's people called me early on.
Did you have people?
This is how we talk, Mel's people. And they said, this was 1993, bear in mind.
This is pre-Braveheart?
This is pre-Braveheart. And they said, this will be Mel's next piece. And this was a sentence I read many times over the ensuing 10 years. He got involved in a couple of booster projects. One of them was called Braveheart. It was a terrible box office bomb, lost tons of money. Another called Passion of the... What was it?
Rabbi.
Right. Another big money was in. So he missed his chance to really be a player. And but that's how it went.
So are we to understand that he was one of the producers? He actually still owned the rights to the film at the end, right?
Well, what happened, if you want to hear the whole, it's called development. If a book is being developed, it's called being in development, or as anyone who calls it, development hell. And what happened was that after a few years of optioning it, I sort of forced them to exercise the option. So they then owned it. And then nothing happened. They produced a bunch of scripts which weren't very good. And other people wanted to make it, but at that point the psychology is out of the school playground. It's our project and you can't play with it. In 2001 I got a call from a young man named Jason Reitman, who was 23 years old at the time. His father produced a movie called Animals. I'm Reitman. Produced Ghostbusters and a big success. Anyway, this is his 23-year-old son, some years ago, and he fell for it. And he wrote a spec script, which is to say a script that there's no financial obligation to it. And he sent it in over the transom to Mel Gibson. And a few months later, his phone rang, and it was Mel calling from his Gulfstream. Which must be exciting if you're a 23-year-old kid, please hold me over. And you hear the sound of the expensive jet turban warming up. And he said, this is the script I've all along wanted, and we're going to make this movie together. And that was the last Jason Reitman ever heard from Mel Gibson. And then someone called me, I worked at the White House, and he said, look, I've got this friend named David Sachs, and he was the chief operating officer of a company called PayPal. And he and his partner sold PayPal to eBay for $1.4 billion. And my ears always perk up at that word.
Because it's a round number.
It's a round number. And he said he now wants to produce movies and wants to produce Science for Smoking. Could he call you? And I said it's always my absolute rule to accept phone calls from people worth $1.4 billion. Turn my books into movies. And so he called, and I said, you must call Mel. So he called Mel's people, and it took 18 months of negotiating to get it away from Mel.
Now, when I asked you that first question, I mean, in my case, you would not have approved of the screenplay. In this case, you actually put the film. You don't rather than they do. It's a really terrific novel, by the way. You should, if you have it going backwards, go back now and read the novel. But in this instance, you know, you're very good-natured about it. It's obviously picked up all the major themes, and you're happy about it. You could have imagined a novelist who wouldn't have been that thrilled with any adaptation.
Usually at this stage, no one is speaking to each other. Or threatening lawsuits, and I'm sure there are a few lawyers in the room.
You are not one. Don't forget.
Yeah, no, I thought he did a terrific job. And what he changed basically was to create a relationship with the son, which is only is referred to very frequently. And other than that, it's actually quite faithful. You know, most writers of books are Hemingway. Most of Hemingway's novels were turned into movies, and he hated all of them. Although I thought some of them were good. But he formulated Hemingway's rule for dealing with Hollywood, and it is as follows: that you put the manuscript in the trunk of your car. You drive up to the California state line. You stop this side of the California state line. You take your manuscript out of the trunk. You make them throw the money off. Then you hurl your manuscript back in the car.
And yet, you just accepted a phone call from Jetstream, Gulfstream.
No, I never spoke to them.
It was just the people.
No, in all these years, I'm virginal.
Mellis.
Mellis and Gaza. But,
So it's something which are keeping with the Forum on Culture and Society. We'll open up questions, so please sort of think about things you want to ask us about. But let me just start asking you a couple questions while you get warmed up. One of the ideas we always think about is the relationship between the moral universe and legal universe. And so although this doesn't have a famous trial scene, this doesn't have the Atkinson moment, it really is a perfect movie for the inauguration of the inaugural film festival. In some ways, because it does sort of address this question that what is legal might not necessarily be moral. The film and the novel is really about the underlying moral question. The process of lobbying is actually quite legal. The process of promoting a product that is actually lethal is in fact legal, but yet there's an underlying moral question.
although an awful lot of lobbyists seem to be going to jail these days. Mr. Abramoff will be, I think.
But that's because they violate sort of ethics rules, and they actually commit crimes.
laws.
They break my, that's the one thing. But in addition
As a lawyer,
Bill, you know how quickly, why do we make them go for 3 years? That's what I want to know.
Give me another year, I'll be on the faculty.
But there is, when you wrote this, it wasn't just this Lauren Bacall-esque glamorous cigarette smoker. There's also this deeper question, right? That she says, well, I want to pay a mortgage. And yet she successfully pays a mortgage by sort of manipulating the world into thinking something that we wouldn't teach our kids, which is what's great about the film and the novel. When we said, would you want your kid smoking? He said, I'd buy him his first pack. I mean, there's an underlying question is, you know, should people think about what their job is? That their job may be perfectly legal, but there's an underlying moral question that they're doing something during their day job that just isn't right. And in fact, this movie's really about that. The novel's really about that.
I became fascinated by the moral ambiguities of people who do this. And I followed around not only a cigarette lobbyist, someone from, I hired a gun lobbyist, a guy from the NRA, and a guy from something called the Beer Institute. And of all of them, he's really the most fun.
He had a big belly.
No, he had a, watch with but in his office, he had a diploma from the Institute of Beer Studies. If I get one, I will hand that back to my newly ordered law. But I was fascinated by these. They're generically called sin lobbyists, S-I-N. And I was, sort of fascinated by, in particular, the tobacco person who would get up, theoretically, in the morning, brush a bowl of raisin bran, kiss the kids, and go and sell death for a living.
Not unlike the surprises of that.
Well, you could probably draw a parallel. Indeed, that figure of 1,200 people
Yeah.
was the industry figure at the time. It's probably roughly that. And yet, I am, I think, temperamentally libertarian. But I would defend your right to smoke. I brought you not smoke in my face. I was against the Bloomberg smoking ban. I think it's a reasonable society ought to make available space for smokers. There are towns in California, Washington State, where they have outdoor smoking bans. You can't light up on the sidewalk, which it seems to me somewhat totalitarian. But there's an awful lot of more I could watching this. No, wait, I mean, if you're a satirist, Washington is ground zero. There's always something to write about.
Speaking of your writing, and we'll open up, you're known principally as a novelist, but also as a satirist.
As a legal.
And a legal authority. I've read a number of your novels. This one has now been made into film. Does this sort of sit now for you as your favorite written project? Does it live on in a different way? Reaching a much larger audience, inevitably in our culture.
Well,
it's a signature Buckley piece now.
It is. This book, there are now about 200,000 copies of this book. But to me, that's a lot. John Grisham, it's a rounding error. But it has been interesting to watch a movie process, because you reach, this movie is now showing sort of everywhere. It seems. I got an email from a friend in Chile, in Santiago, Chile. So, I just saw it. It's playing in France, in the UK, in Australia. The people who have been on flights to Singapore say, "Oh, it's playing on the plane."
I saw it 5 times coming back from Melbourne.
Shouldn't you have been reading?
No. I was prepping this. Always looking after me, my friend.
By the way, after I get my book, I will do that.
I think he's angry for my
Someone, I think, what I'm grasping and saying is the dissemination process of the movie is just on such a different scale from at least my kind of book selling. I think it used to be when if a play of Shakespeare's was broadcast on television. This was true 15 years ago when I heard this. That meant that more people saw it than had seen it performed in the previous 4 years. I mean, that's the scale.
So are you, as libertarian and sort of democratically oriented in this way, you're also a man of letters. Is this a troubling phenomenon? And so on the one hand, you're a man of putting words on paper. You know that the best way to reach people with what a message or idea is to get the paper from the paper to cellular. Now, most writers really have an ambivalent relationship with the adaptation of the work. I think the purity of it is the most important thing.
As long as the check. Yeah, I'm really in it for the mortgage. I mean, it's great that they came along and made it into the, I think, a good movie. But it's, having observed the process, I'm amazed that any movie ever gets made. There are so many moving parts. This movie was not expensive to make, relatively. It cost $6.5 million. That's probably, 2 days filming of a Mel Gibson movie. Movies are expensive, and yet, we've recently seen, a flood of independent movies. The Blair Witch Project cost, what, $7,000 to make? Well, they basically made it, the kind of selling video. Anyway, it's become a much more democratic process in that sense. But I'm a writer. I write books. I've had the same book editor for 7 years. I'm writing it for him. And sort of, if you're writing writing a screenplay, so being in Hollywood is not for the faint of heart. I've known a number of people who have been crushed by it.
Was there a temptation to write the screenplay?
It's a different skill set. I couldn't have written a screenplay as good as Jason's. Scott Rhodes who's going to be here at the second most historic occasion.
Nothing will ever beat this.
But I believe he works on scripts. We'll work out.
I will ask him, and I'll actually mention that you on the inaugural invoke his name. So let's open up, yes, some questions. We have people with mics. This is for law school with mics. Very sophisticated. Only one mic. You have a mic. But you have to really hustle. Yes, sir.
Explain the reason why the father-son relationship was developed in the film more than your book. Like I did mention Jason and Ivan, their relationship. I think that's what where Jason figures who had the father and son following father's footsteps, which is the way the film came across. Is there a scene from your novel that you would have liked to have seen portrayed in the film? And there was never an answer to what the initial BR stands for.
The BR thing is insignificant. They're just initials. That was Jason's little fill-in, which I thought was very clever. Everyone who knew the meaning of it is now dead. I don't really have a good answer for you as to is there a scene in the book that I'd like to see in the movie. One of the scenes I was happiest with in the book is the Bride of Marlborough Man. And that's almost word for word from the book. And there, to me, there's no way to make this sound unself-important, but I thought it was kind of cool way of showing some moral jujitsu. I mean, he goes in to bribe an honorable cowboy and ends up making him take a ride. And getting from point A to B is also Sam Elliott, I think, has always been one of my favorite actors.
That scene works great.
That was his rifle, by the way. He brought his own. And also the scene with Rob Lowe. There's some very interesting little performances where they're only in it for 4 minutes, and yet they steal. They all steal the movie. The Rob Lowe characters, of course, is based on Michael Ovitz, famously fascinated by this Attenborough Asian jet. That scene in the waiting room where they're waiting to go in, and you see the killer whale killing the seal. One thing that interested me when the movie came out, Jason took it on on the road and showed it at about 30 college campuses. And the kids all loved it. And just they went for it in a big way. And you had them laughing at a scene, with baby seals being crushed. More seals die in this movie than in most movies. And what it said to me is that I think that there's been a PC paradigm shift. I mean, a lot of the kids, a college kid, circa today, has basically lived from cradle to now in the age of PC. You know, don't do this, don't do that. This is definitely, that's not funny. People say that's not funny.
And after a while,
And I think they're
backlash.
I think they're ready to laugh.
Either that or they don't give a shit about seals.
Either that or they're just heartless little bastards.
I think it's the seal community, nobody cares. Do you have something? Yeah.
I have two questions, if I may. First, how did you find the reaction of lobbyists, especially the ones that you hung out with and were just sort of... And secondly, I found it interesting, and I'm not, maybe I missed it, but I don't remember seeing Nick smoke in the movie at all. He reached for a cigarette pack once, but is there a reason for that?
Jason, who does not smoke, was determined that there would be no cigarettes shown in the movie, which interested me. In the, by the way, in the book, the real villain is BR. BR is behind the kidnapping. Because he wants to get Curry something. And in the book, Nick nearly dies. By the way, in researching that scene, I wanted, for visual purposes, to be covered, they strip him and cover him head to toe in nicotine patches. And it was that, and he escapes, and he ends up running down the mall in Washington in the reflecting pool. It's at night, and he's in a completely deranged. And it was that scene that made Mel Gibson want to, once again, that crucifixion thing. But I called up a doctor friend of mine, who's a cardiologist, and I said, and I read in the dosage of nicotine patches, I said, is it feasible to cover someone head to toe in these things? And he laughed and said he'd be dead in about 15 minutes. I said, well, how many could you really tolerate? Maybe 4 patches. You know, anyway.
Where are we? Yes, back there. Oh, we got a mic.
This gentleman has
Oh, yes.
been trying to ask a question.
Back there.
Sorry.
Where is the mentor?
Of scenes that weren't in the movie, but that I particularly love in the book, the scene where the homeless man lights a cigarette at Arlington Cemetery. I can just talk really loud. I love that part, and I thought you were going to mention it just now, but I love that part in the book particularly. But taking the libertarian standpoint, when I saw the movie opening because I loved the book, there was a man sitting in front of me who laughed for the entire movie. It was somewhat disconcerting because he had a trach tube in, and you could hear it the entire time. And he loved the movie. He was there. His wife. I didn't talk to him afterwards, but you could tell.
Maybe he just hated seals.
It's awesome. But it's very easy to look at the people who probably gave you a lot of shit for making it look somewhat glorified or making it at least look somewhat even. But what kind of responses did you get from people who said, yeah, it's not really fair that people who smoke are discriminated against, and smoking companies are always looked at as like drug dealers? Did you get any response from people that said, thank you for at least giving it a level stance?
It's not directly, but I hear that it's become sort of a cult thing in Washington among the lobbyists. Even when the book came out, the name Nick Naylor caught on as a nickname. They lobbied for calling each other Nick Naylor. So that sort of pleased me.
Hi. Oh, this is loud.
the moments in the film I thought was really interesting is when Nick Miller with his son at the, I think it's an amusement park, and they're having a debate about vanilla chocolate. And in order to emerge victorious, Naylor goes off on this tangential that is ultimately irrelevant to the discussion, but really aimed at capturing maternal needs. And that was a pretty poignant moment for me because I think that's a strategy that is used very frequently in public discourse, I think, in a tragic way, because in a lot of ways, the point of the discussion is lost. I was wondering if that was an issue that went, if that's even in the book. I don't know where it does exist. But even if it isn't, to what degree do you think that satirical works and arts like this can raise a discussion of that issue, avoiding the question, or even just destroying the discussion in a way that really, I think, quashes really healthy conversation about real children?
Well, it's an interesting point. I think we're super saturated with spin. This is, culture spin. In the book, when I wrote the book, the term had not yet become a term of art. It was James Carville and George Stephanopoulos in the War Room. Remember where we first started to hear the word spin doctors. As to the satirical aspect, we live in a world where, according to the polls, as many as 80, 90, 100% of young people, I would include you, not me, perhaps you, are getting all their political information from Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert. I don't know if that's a good thing. I admire them both tremendously, and they've made a lot more money. But I'm not sure what the consequences of that are. Take, for instance, Kim Jong-il, the dictator of North Korea. We could probably all agree that this is, whatever your politics, that this is one bad apple. And yet he's sort of a figure of fun, and I've used him as a figure of fun. The leisure suits, the hair. But this is a monster. This is a monster who starves children while he drinks $25,000 bottles of wine, and now he's got nukes. He's great fodder for Jon Stewart and Steve Colbert and lesser practitioners of the genre like myself. If this were 1940, would Hitler, a cognate monster, be a figure of fun? Would we be laughing? I think you can see, maybe it's an approximate crowd, but you can see that some things have changed. And the question is, at what point does it stop being funny? And I'm not sure we 20 cents off a bomb, in Tokyo, but it's not funny.
Yes.
Right, what you just said. I'm thinking of Lubitsch, To Be or Not To Be, making fun of people.
Yes, yeah, and Charlie Chaplin was the great dictator.
Which gets into the other question that there were many film references. Jimmy Stewart, the Ringo Call that you mentioned now, the John Wayne Western where he gets killed, where we didn't see the credits, so I don't know.
Sam B. Wojima.
Were they choice or were they?
Yeah, those were all in the book.
The photographs?
I'm sorry?
And the photographs, changing the teacher holding a coffee cup?
No, that was Jason, which I thought was a very clever. And that's actually, happened. I don't know if you remember, but a couple of years ago, the U.S. Postal Service decided to issue a Jackson Pollock stamp honoring a great American painter. You may remember the famous photograph of Jackson Pollock shows him painting, and he's got a cigarette. He very much so. and they took it out in the stand. I got a call from CBS News, and they asked me to go on comment on that. I said, look, you know, you're screwing around with the cultural DNA when you do something like that. It's sort of the equivalent of Joseph, the portrait of Joseph Karsh, reaching over and snatching Churchill's cigar out of the stand. I mean, you know, it's you make the image into a lie. But I thought, so I don't know if that was on Jason's mind, but I thought it was very, very clever. And that's actually, I guess my only point is, that's being done. And it's being done by an agency of the U.S.
It's
government.
not only making the image alive, it's making memory of the person alive.
It
It's
is.
far more significant than the image.
Right. We'll go over to this gentleman, and this one over here, and we're coming across. Yes.
Was there ever a dilemma in writing of the book or in the making of the movie regarding how Nick Miller would respond to the question raised by William Macy as to what will he do when his son reaches 18?
Well, see, that was, that's in the movie, but not the book. So I didn't write the screenplay. That was Jason.
Could you give us yours?
Well, as a matter of fact, I have an 18-year-old daughter who smokes. Has a lot of teenage girls do. And I have a 14-year-old. And I have a father who has emphysema because he smoked. And I smoked until I spent 3 days at the bedside of a friend who was dying of lung cancer. It's not a pleasant way to go. So what I've done with my daughter is, because I know I can't stop her from smoking, but I said I have tried to give her all the information, and I've said to her in a gentle way, look, let me just tell you about this. Your grandfather has emphysema, which means he is gradually going to choke to death. Suffocate. And I know it keeps you from eating too much, and it's kind of fun to do, and it's sort of cool, and I did it, but I guarantee you the day will come when you no longer want to do this, and it will be very hard to stop. So, I don't know what there is to say, but it's an interesting moment in the film. You build it out, and my sense is that he has given a disappointing answer.
Yes, right here, and then we'll come back up there.
Diverge a bit from the main purpose of the discussion. I thought one of the other really interesting things in the movie was the reporter character and the particular commentary on the press and its role through her. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the inspiration behind that and what you think the ultimate takeaway message is from that.
I thought her role was one of the less satisfying ones. How to put this? She was not yet, this is Tom Cruise, when signed her up. It's not, I don't think it's a completely compelling part. I don't think it was entirely her fault. Reporters don't screw people to get quotes. That's just not how it works. It may have happened in the past. I don't know. The reporter, I live in Washington. I know a lot of these people, and although you may recall, it was alleged that Judy Miller of the New York Times, who spent some time in jail in the whole Valerie Plame business, had slept with, had a, however, it was what an inappropriate relationship with Scooter Bibby. I just don't know. But I think, in answer to your question, that bit is a little bit false.
Back here.
It says in your bio that you were a speechwriter for the old President Bush. I was wondering how much of that role inspired this movie. That has been more interesting to me would be how much of speechwriting is spin, as you put it.
The only thing we have to fear is spin it. I was George Herbert Walker's speechwriter when he was vice president. A lovely man, and an awful lot of it was spin, yeah. But it was an interesting time. The Cold War was on. There were the issues were big. He was, by the way, a lovely man. I don't know what happened to the next generation. I suppose that, well, I mean, when I sat down to write a speech, I didn't think, oh, how can I pull the wool over the eyes of the, of the world? It doesn't work. I didn't, I tried to do an honest job, and sometimes did. But yeah, there's quite a bit of it. But if you applied a very rigorous definition to this in political speechwriting, you could accuse Winston Churchill of spin during World War II, when he said, "We will fight them on the beaches, we'll fight them in the streets." I mean, but that was, but he was also inspiriting a nation. So it's a very broad term. But one way or the other, we do seem to be living in sin, as the Catholics like to.
A few announcements. Remember, the film festival continues tomorrow night with Remand 2, Broadway, Tony-nominated actors Boyd Gaines and Peter Friedman. Next month, on December 5th, we have Scott Turow, so it's in our program. Please, if you haven't already, sign up, make sure you're on our mailing list, give us your email address, find out how we found you last time, and stay tuned to all the programming here at the Forum on Law, Culture, and Society, your forum at Fordham, and we must thank